You're listening to The Deep End, a pen plastic surgery podcast. Today, Dr. Saeed Azori sits down with Dr. David Song, an internationally respected leader in plastic surgery and healthcare administration. Dr. Song currently serves as the Chief Medical Officer at Medstar, Georgetown University Hospital, and Vice President of Medical Affairs. He is the former chair of the Department of Surgery at Medstar and former chair of plastic surgery there as well. He is past president of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, past chair of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, and an absolute trailblazer in microsurgery and leadership. In this episode, we'll explore Dr. Song's unique journey from his early passion for education inspired by his family to his groundbreaking career that spans clinical excellence. Let's jump in.
Thanks so much for joining me today on the Deep End podcast. Incredible honor to be with Dr. Song, somebody who I look up to on so many different levels, and who was the third person in my oral board exam room not too long ago, and thankfully I passed. But as we go through this podcast, we'll introduce Dr. Song, but currently, he is the CMO at Georgetown Medstar and the Vice President of Medical Affairs. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and be a part of this.
Yes. So as I kind of just mentioned, you're somebody that I look up to on multiple different levels. Not only as a microsurgeon and who really, from everything I heard, did head to toe reconstructive microsurgery, but also your ability to kind of cross the boundaries in leadership from plastic surgery and beyond to not only departments of surgery, but to major institutions as a plastic surgeon, which is incredibly, incredibly unique. And that truly fascinates me because I think back to perhaps my upbringing and others, how other people grew up. And clearly there was some sort of influence or something that helped shape you to who you are today as you grew up, perhaps. And so can you speak a little bit about your upbringing, maybe important aspects of your early years and success?
Yeah, thanks, Saeed. I think part of it for me is education was such a true north in our family and still is. Ever since I was a kid, a lot of families will say that you strive to be a CEO or a sports star or the president or what have you. In our family, it was always being a professor. That was
Mhm.
like ever since I was a kid. My grandfather, on both sides of the family, and it was such a revered thing to be to strive to be a university professor. So I always had that in my mind since I was a child. I didn't know I would do it in surgery, but it was something that, again, was inculcated in my family for quite some time. So that's probably the biggest early influence. And I think I remember back as a child, young child, I think 5 or 6, my uncle, who was a professor, ran a hospital and also was at one point ran the WHO for Asia, was a huge
Oh,
influence on
wow.
me. And so every time he'd go away to give a lecture in Egypt or in Turkey, or he always had um, a habit of bringing back like a little souvenir, a
Mhm.
little mini pyramid or something. And so his house was replete with little trinkets from all over the world. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And so I remember coming back from a visiting professor. I think this was in China, or maybe it was in Sweden, and I
Mhm.
got a little trinket and reminded me of him. So it goes back really as a young child to the family putting education and being an educator as such a priority.
Yeah. And did you have any siblings or your parents kind of in the medical field or education?
My mom's a nurse, but
Mhm.
my brother is actually an actor, and so
Oh,
he's in Hollywood now, and if you've ever watched Jury Duty, it's a show uh,
Yeah.
he's one of the main characters there. So it's a totally divergent pathway for my brother and I.
So no one else really in medicine in your immediate family, aside from your mom being a nurse.
That's
Yeah.
right. So my father was an accountant, and so it was just something that was internalized again, probably from my uncle, who was such a big influence in my life.
So what was your favorite non-school thing to do growing up?
Uh, video
Acting?
video
Video
games.
games?
No, I was I'll tell you a really funny story. When I was one of the first plastic surgeons to do robotic surgery, I don't know if you
Mhm.
know this, but back in 2004, I was doing cavernous nerve reconstructions robotically. So the urologist would do the prostatectomy, and I'd go in there, harvest the scrotal nerve, and do a nerve reconstruction. And
Mhm.
I was doing the first training session, and the trainer looked at me and said, "Man, have you done this before?" And I looked at him and said, "I've been doing this all my life."
That's
And
so funny.
I called my mom and I said, all those years where you were scolding me for playing video games, really paid off because, I think I'm a bit of a natural playing, scoring the highest score or whatever on the Da Vinci, the early Da Vinci. So
Oh,
it
that's so
was,
funny.
so played a lot of video games.
Well, the funny thing is I actually just read a paper. I'd have to look it back up. I think it was published in Surgery, looking at video games and surgical skills.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the ability to connect something through a screen with your hands. And I think it lends well to microsurgery and clearly to robotic surgery because, it's just your neural pathways were developed and developing, in your formative years playing video games. And to all the moms and dads out there, I don't necessarily think this is the best pathway, but yeah, I played a lot of video games. Used to go to the
Yeah.
arcade with rolls of quarters and before you had your own console at home and Atari and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, I got my three daughters American Girl dolls for Christmas, but maybe I'll get them video games instead.
yeah, so my three girls, I have three daughters as well, Saida,
I
as you
knew that. Yeah.
they didn't really get into it. I mean,
Yeah.
I have two like Xboxes and played Call of Duty, pretty good at it for a while. And but my daughters would use it as a DVD player.
Yeah. Are any of them interested in medicine?
I think my youngest, possibly. I have two. My older, Olivia, who's a senior now, and Ava, who's a freshman. They're both at University of Chicago. I'm not so sure
Oh,
that they
wow.
have. Yeah, but who knows? You never know.
Yeah. So then, aside from your uncle, when you were entering kind of your college years, is that when you kind of made up your mind as to what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
In high school, because I wanted to be a physician as a young child, I started to sort of stray away from it because believe it or not, I was really squeamish. Like the
Hmm.
sight of blood and anything gross, I just got really this visceral response. And I remember as a senior in high school, a career day guy came and gave a talk, and he was a vascular surgeon and he just showed these grotesque pictures. And for the first time, everyone in the class was like, and I was like, whoa, fascinated. And something flipped at that lecture, and sort of affirmed, my desire, and maybe it was that immersion therapy session with blood everywhere that got me going. So. But
Yeah.
that I remember that distinctly, and I think that's sort of the turning point. And I applied foolishly to this 7-year medical program not
Hmm.
knowing that it was a pyramid program. They accept like 400 kids, and they only accept 24 into the medical school part of the program. And back in the late 80s, there was no internet, so you couldn't Google like what's this program like. All you had was some program description that you can get at the library that's probably 3 years old, and so and rumors and hearsay. So I got into this program and fortunately I made it through, but it was touch and go because there was moments in time where my counselor would call me up or demand a meeting and say, "Hey, Dave, there are 200 and some kids with better GPAs and scores than you," and this was in the 80s where they pulled no punches. It would be like, Saeed,
Hmm.
you scored 85. There's 28 kids that scored better than you with a better GPA. You may think about a different major.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I was in a fraternity, and that probably detracted from my GPA, and so I took a little hiatus from the fraternity and sort of grinded. Fortunately, I got through, but yeah, I was totally foolish. I didn't know anything about applying to colleges. I mean, it's such a science now. Back then, it was like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, someone said, hey, UCLA has a 7-year program. All right, sounds good. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that's how it happened. It wasn't thought out at all.
Yeah, it's funny your story about being squeamish. So my very first exposure to plastic surgery was with Larry Colin. It was an office procedure, mole excision, and I got lightheaded, had to sit down, and nearly fainted. Very
Yeah,
first exposure. And then the
yeah.
next week, I scrubbed an open colectomy with LD Brit and was totally fine. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. But that's very interesting about your path to medicine. And then, so what made you choose plastic surgery?
So, I thought I was going to do, I mean, I was one of these students that loved everything. I mean,
Hmm.
at one point, I thought I'd be an ID doc. I loved GI. I loved cardiology. But I was coming back from a trauma. I did my trauma rotation at Harvard UCLA, which is a level
Hmm.
one sort of safety net hospital. I was there all night, and then I was coming home at 2 in the morning. I was walking by a OR, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on in there? It's 2 in the morning." Oh, they're reattaching a finger. I thought, "Oh, I got it." I was peeking through, and the OR nurse at the time knew me from the trauma rotation. She's like, "Why don't you come in?" I'm like, "Are you sure?" So I stood there, fascinated, and some guy was putting the bones and nerves together, and then started to put these little blood vessels together under a microscope. And I'm like, wow, who is that, a vascular surgeon or ortho? He's like, no, no, that's a plastic surgeon. That's Dr. Mal Lesevoy. I was like, oh my gosh. So
Hmm.
he he wanted, he was gracious. He's like, he didn't know who I was, brought me in. He's like, why don't you scrub in? So I scrubbed in, and I was just blown away. And I reached out to him, and I said, hey, do you think I could shadow you? I didn't even think about plastic surgery because, back in the early 90s, plastic surgery, I didn't know any better. I thought it was all, cosmetic stuff,
Exactly.
especially growing up in LA.
Yeah.
Blew me away. I was doing lower extremity reconstruction, scalp reconstruction, or breast reconstruction, all in one day. Um, and that's sort of what got me hooked. And then back in the early to mid 90s, there were not many, very few integrated programs at all. So
Hmm.
Dr. Lesevoy, who trained in surgery at U Chicago, said, "Hey, you got to go to Chicago and do surgery there. It's the best training program. Please go there." Made some calls, and sort of the rest is history. But I had no contacts in Chicago, didn't know anybody. I'd never been to Chicago,
Hmm.
and so it's all these mentors and these serendipitous, 2 a.m. Hey, curiosity calls,
Yes.
that sort of shape your life.
And the fact that not only did you go there, you stayed there for your job, and then now your daughters
Yeah,
go
yeah,
there.
yeah. It's
Like,
so fascinating. I mean, I'm looking at my diploma right now, Saeed, and from my business school diploma there, and I look back in the early '90s. To be totally frank, I had never heard of the University of Chicago. You grow up in a little bubble in Southern California, and you think the best school is like UCLA or Stanford.
yeah.
Didn't know Chicago had the most Nobel laureates in any university, didn't know anything
Hmm.
about econ department. Um, and then, lo and behold, you fast forward 25 years and, graduate from there, and also two kids that go there. So it's
It's
all from that
it,
one moment, possibly,
it
2 a.m.
almost makes you think like what happens if they had recommended a different institution, like would have everything paved out the same way. Life is very interesting if you think about it.
Yeah. And Said, you have a really good point there because I will tell you, I never thought I'd leave Southern California. Very few Southern Californians leave
Yes.
Southern California. It's like, you're sort of stuck there. Never really been to the East Coast, let alone the Midwest. I thought I'd want to stay at UCLA. But it was the match took me there, and Dr. Lesevoy, made some calls, and the rest is history. But again, I never would have thought of U Chicago.
So what made you get your MBA? Um, and at the time that you did it, why did you do it at that time?
Yeah, I had no concept of a business degree or a business mind at all. And I became a division chief at a very young age. I was like three
Mhm.
years out of training and I became a
Wow.
division chief. Yeah.
Yeah, how did that happen?
So I was being recruited at other places, and the position opened up at U Chicago, and the dean and the chair asked me to consider it. And I'm like, first I said, "You out of your mind? I'm 34 years old. I'm
Were
just out
you
of
were
training."
you associate professor?
I was about to be early promoted to associate, and some of my early external research was really taken off.
Uh-huh.
And simultaneously, I was being recruited in California to go back home.
Uh-huh.
And long story short, so they did a search, and then they asked me to consider after the search. And apparently everyone thought, which I think is crazy at this when I look back, like who asks a 34-year-old kid to run a division, right? So
Mhm.
uh, obviously Bruce Gewertz, who was my mentor and chair at the time, saw something that I didn't see in me. And after that, I remember the first couple of meetings with an administrator. They brought these three-ring binders, put it on my desk, and said, we need to make some decisions about the finances of the division. And I'd never seen a spreadsheet of that, for scientific data, yeah, but
Mhm.
nothing financial. So that got me really interested, and I guess I sort of overcompensated by going to business school. But when I went to business school, there were very few physicians that did an MBA, and that was kind of unique at that time. And I made sure that I dove in as not a physician, but just as another student. It was in my class of 90. I think there were only two other physicians, both that were not practicing physicians. They
Yeah.
were doing it for a career change. And so it was a very unique time. It was a very fun time. But that's sort of how my business track got started, completely by accident. Never had it thought out. So I
Mhm.
was just mentoring a kid, a medical student here a few weeks ago, who's like, "Oh, I'm gonna, do an MBA in the middle of med school, and here's my pathway." I thought, wow, I didn't even know anything about a
Mhm.
career as an administrator, let alone a CMO, back when I was a student.
Yeah, well, credit goes to the person who saw that in you, or because, as you said, I mean, it's those people that help kind of guide us forward. Rod Rourke in his podcast talked about how 4 years in as an attending at UT Southwestern, again, early promotion to associate professor, but that was when he became the chief and then chair of his department.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you got your MBA not with a goal for the future of institutional leadership, or it was
No.
purely just to help you be better at your job as a division chief.
100%. To really sort of understand the business of healthcare better and being able to extrapolate from, these case studies on FedEx or on Loctite or all these other companies, try to bring that back to my division and then my department as a surgical department. Yeah, that was the end goal.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm getting my MPH now. Weekly I have courses, and I really enjoy it at this time. I feel like I've developed a sense of maturity where I can actually sit in a class and listen, and extract from it the things that I really need to help me do what I'm doing better. But I think it's like the perfect time of getting it, and we as physicians, I think, have that desire to continue learning. And after this, like, I don't want to stop. Like, there's other things that I want to study. And it's so nice to be at institutions like Georgetown, U Chicago, Penn, where you have all those resources where you can get an MBA, get an MPH, whatever you want, as lifelong learners.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It, goes probably back to the way you were raised too, Saeed. Sounds like it was
Yeah.
very similar to how I was raised. Is education is such a driving force in my life. It's a foundational force in my life, and it just doesn't stop when you're, quote unquote, done with school. I mean, it's constantly I'm learning a new language right now, and it's invigorating to learn something new. The brain doesn't work as fast as it did a few decades ago, but yeah, I mean that we're blessed to be at university institutions where you're right, you can just walk across the street to a business school, or down the hall to get your master's in public health. It's something that I think is a part of the fabric of who we are as, I think, academic plastic surgeons.
Yeah. So looking back, are you thankful that you got it?
Oh yeah, I couldn't do what I do now. I'm not saying this out of false modesty at all. I truly couldn't do what I do now. Uh, uh, I'm not smart enough to do my job today without having gone to business school. And I think that to me, it's every day I lean on principles that I learned in school. And I told the student the other day, had I gone to business school before medical school, I'm not sure I would be a physician, because I truly really got a kick out of understanding the business world.
Well, I think, everything that you're mentioning to me, and I never recognized this as a trainee, but um, everything that I heard about Dr. David Song was you're uh, a superb technical surgeon, and I know you did your training there, your microsurgery training there. Um, did you always find that, surgical ability was kind of your core existence, and then everything else kind of came second, or how did you kind of manage that?
Yeah, and this is the advice I give to residents and students is, first and foremost, you want to be an outstanding clinician. You want to be known for your clinical um, knowledge, acumen, technical abilities before you do anything else. Because I think that when you do that, you have tremendous street credibility, if you will,
Yes,
among colleagues. And I still operate today. A couple of months ago, I did a chimeric free flap for a lower extremity with my team. So I think
that's what I was going to
that's,
ask.
yeah, it's critical that in order to in this day and age, now leaders more and more are not sitting behind a desk. They're
Hmm.
on the ground. I make rounds every day throughout the hospital. I'm in the OR. You have to be visible. You have to sort of understand the friction points that your colleagues are going through, so you can
Yes.
help them understand how to get past it. If you don't know it viscerally, it'll be hard to lead in this day and age, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many outside pressure and influences now. For instance, for medical students, like, maybe the focus should be academics and then everything else comes next. As a resident, focus on your clinical ability, because now you have the pressures of social media, and all this other stuff that's happening. But no, we all truly are inspired by that. And the fact that you're still operating is impressive. And perhaps like in a leadership role, as you mentioned, not only for your surgeon colleagues or those who are under you, how important it is to still show them that you're in the clinical side, but also just on the leadership side as well, just to keep your skill set that you've worked your whole life obtaining.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, as a microsurgeon, uh, you feel it when you don't do microsurgery for a few months, right?
yeah.
So, especially I was doing, I don't know, 3 to 4 deep flaps bilaterals a week, very similar to
Mm,
kind of the volume that you guys do at Penn. And, when you don't operate to that degree, you kind of start to get rusty. So you got to stay in the game. So,
mm,
that's, that's my advice to all the young folks out there watching this is, really focus on your clinical foundation first. Be excellent at what you're doing
mhm.
as a physician, because it's hard to think about the end goal without going through the journey of developing into an outstanding surgeon. So I think that's the critical piece to being a leader within healthcare. And that
Mhm.
goes for all specialties, whether you're infectious disease or emergency room doctor or hospitalist. I mean, be excellent at what you do and taking care of patients, and the rest will follow.
Yeah. So then you transitioned to Georgetown at a certain point and broke down a lot of walls that we as plastic surgeons aren't you know, always able to do. Not only did you become the chair of the Department of Surgery, now you're CMO of a major, major medical health system. How did that happen that you left Chicago to go to Georgetown? And then how did you become the chair of the Department of Surgery, et cetera?
Yeah. So back in 2016, I was really ecstatic and happy at U Chicago. I was associate dean for the medical school,
Mhm.
vice chair of the department, ran plastic surgery, an endowed chair. I just thought I'd never leave. And I remember, driving up Lakeshore Drive, and it was one of these beautiful days. And I thought, wow, I've got it pretty good. I'm
Mhm.
early to mid 40s, got a great career. My kids are happy at Chicago. And then right around the corner past Soldier Field, I went from like the moment of elation to like, wow, is this it? And I remember at that moment in time, I thought, if this is it, I could be happy here. But I got this sense of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's not complacency, but uh, is there no more growth in my career? Coincidentally, the Medstar system contacted me like a month and a half later, and initially I was kind of hesitant, only because I really truly enjoyed U Chicago, and
Mhm.
being both a resident and a fellow and a faculty member and division chief there. I just thought I'd never leave. But I knew a couple people down here, and so I came down just to take a look, and I was really blown away by the healthcare system. So back when I was at Chicago, there was really only one hospital. It was the main academic hospital, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to figure out how to contribute to healthcare delivery across a system? And so that's what brought me to DC and Medstar Health. And as you probably know, it's a 10 hospital system, multiple different service lines. And so, plastic surgery became a service line when I got here. And we really, went from like 12 faculty members to 3 divisions and 24 faculty members, 2 residency programs, and, with just an institute, a wound healing institute, a whole center for gender affirmation surgery, things that we didn't have here at MedStar when I got here. It was just incredibly rewarding to build that. And then the system leadership asked me to consider running all of surgery. So for about 3 years, I was chief of surgery for the service line across the system, and chair of the department of surgery here. Um, and then I did that for 3 years, and then I was asked to be the chief medical officer here at Georgetown University Hospital. So that's sort of that journey within the last, gosh, January 1 will be 8 years that I've
Yeah.
been in DC.
How old were your kids when you made the move?
So my daughters at that time were finishing 8th grade, 5th grade, and 3rd grade. So it was like, if they didn't match up at those points in time, I probably wouldn't have moved, because it was
Yeah.
a natural transition. My oldest going to high school, my middle child going to middle school, which was a different school on the same
Hmm.
campus, and then my young, my baby was just a 3rd grader. So the timing was just actually perfectly aligned.
That's nice because you always hear that concern, and it shows you how much like family plays a role into all of our decision making. But you always hear that concern that, moving your kids, moving your wife or a significant other, and to a completely different place, make new friends, etc. But it sounds like it was the right time, right?
Yeah, all the start, it was I look back at my life, and all those little things sort of line up. The timing was just, perfectly lined up with all those things that have happened, including coming to DC.
Yeah. So,
Because I will tell you, I mean, like you with 3 daughters, I mean, I always tell my faculty and students and people that I'm mentoring, we've got a great job, right, Saeed? I mean, who has it better than us? But at the end
yeah.
of the day, it's still a job, right? So the most
Hmm.
important thing is your significant other, your kids, your family. And I look back, and had it been a year earlier or a year later, I probably wouldn't have come, because it's too disruptive to move,
Hmm.
children in the middle of high school. And I think that and especially when I had it so good there, and it was such a great job. So I look back, and it was just that timing of it that allowed me to feel good about making the move, as opposed to taking someone out of the middle of high school or something, or middle school.
Mhm.
So it was just a nice transition period for all three of the girls.
Yeah, because it's a lot of pressure. Like, not only is it a risk that you're taking for yourself when you have it so good, but it's a risk that you're taking for other people, your kids and your significant other. That's the external pressure when you're in those circumstances.
Oh, for sure, and we still love Chicago. I mean, we had a great life there, and it was hard to leave. But I look back, and it's been, DC's been tremendous. Georgetown's been incredible for us. Medstar's been great. So obviously the right move. But it's a scary thing to make a move like that when you're mid-career and you've got young children, and and you actually loved your job. And so, but
Yeah.
again, a lot of it's based on timing and uh, that directional goal that you wanted to achieve.
Yeah. So without any reservation or filter, clearly other people saw something in you at much younger ages that we would expect now. And if you had to step into their shoes and say, what did they perhaps see, or what has given me the ability to do what I've done, chair of the Department of Surgery, CMO, president of our major plastic surgery organizations, head of the oral board exam. What do you think that they perhaps saw, or what do you think are a few things that help excel in these different roles?
And to be frank, Saeed, early on, I was probably had major imposter syndrome like everyone else. And because, you're 34, 35, and you're running, a major academic division at a major university. And I recently asked Bruce Gortz, because I still am very close to him, and recently had played golf with him out here. Um, and I said, were you just insane, or what did you see uh, in me? And I think insanity was probably the real answer. But he said something that I didn't realize. I think the level of maturity and the ability to connect with people, and
Mhm.
the relationship building, because there's always someone smarter than you, always someone more
Mhm.
knowledgeable than you, always a better technical surgeon than you. But I think that for me, it's about relationship building and understanding and the your counterpart and your colleagues, and where they want to go as an organization, and really having a clarified vision of the goal. And that's probably, I look back, and if I have really any strengths, I mean, it's, again, many people are brighter, many people are better technically. I think for me, it's understanding the goals and the relationships in a very interconnected way to move an organization forward.
Mhm. And you spoke about this in your visit to Penn, but also in many different conferences, societies, about your emphasis in diversity. And I feel this, growing up with having three daughters and kind of watching them play, I hope that one day they have all the opportunities, and that they're never limited by society or whatnot, that they're given exactly the opportunities that they deserve. So, and just what, and I had three sisters as well. And so that's played a major role in how I kind of approach my daily schedule at work and my mentees. What has kind of made you appreciate the emphasis of diversity in medicine and plastic surgery, et cetera?
Our field is such a growth field in plastic surgery, and healthcare is so complex that when you have groupthink, a lot of organizations have challenges when they have similar people with similar thought processes. And business is the same way. Diversity and bringing people from different backgrounds with different thought processes um, always makes a better company, a better hospital, a
Hmm.
better health system. And you lean on those differences and the diverse perspectives to help propel an institution forward. And I think that's a real key driver in the success of this country, right? I mean, think of the United States of America. Here's a Korean immigrant that is in my position. I mean, this doesn't happen in any other
Mhm.
country in the world, or if it does, it's exceptionally hard and rare. And here in the United States, our you know I don't want to get into politics, but what I will say is if you look back at our country, arguably the greatest nation history has ever known, in so many different ways. If you look at, wealth generation, technology generation, et cetera. Um, and we're only 200, whatever, 70 some years old. I mean, my family burial plot in Seoul or in outside of Seoul, it's called a city called Daejeon, goes back several hundred years, right? So,
Mhm.
uh, but all this to say, I think the diversity, the different backgrounds, the Germans, the Irish, the Koreans, the Palestinians, Israelis, that bring to a common goal of freedom and propelling a country forward is really what makes this country so great. And I think people often forget that. And I think, it's a microcosm when you look at a healthcare system or a company. That diversity is truly your foundational strength. And I think that that's a key component of, and a key tenet of mine is to make sure that we're bringing people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different religious perspectives,
Mhm.
work together for a common goal. And then you don't really miss a lot of things. You get to really survey the entire spectrum of how to move forward.
Yeah, and to have all of those different perspectives is what's really, really special. And it's nice to hear somebody in your position think of it like that. Um,
Just to be clear, not diversity for diversity's sake, but
yeah, of
diversity
course.
to
Yeah.
propel an institution forward. And I think that it just makes great business sense too. If you think about a department that has women and Asians and Latinos and African Americans, I mean, a department of plastic surgery with diversity. Um, One is just better business sense because you're attracting the entire population. If you just had a department full of Koreans, I'll use my,
Mhm.
you're not necessarily going to resonate to the population outside of your four walls. And so and it goes to companies, hospitals, healthcare systems
Mhm.
like.
I think that's the important conversation that we have to have about diversity because so much and which is why I wanted you to mention everything you just said is oftentimes you're at a conference or a meeting and everyone just says we need more diversity, we need more diversity, but no one says it like you just said it. Why do we? And explain the benefits, explain what a special place and the advances you can make when everyone works together from all these different backgrounds. Then it's an eye opener, and it's a no-brainer. But to completely just to you I think we have to spend more time explaining all the benefits than just to constantly say we need it more, and
Yeah, and I see a lot of universities and companies checking boxes now, and that's
yes.
the wrong way, right? Because you're not you're using diversity as a means to an end and not a complete strategic directional goal. And I
Mhm.
think that's when institutions can get in trouble when they're checking boxes as opposed to bringing in different thought makers. For so I'll give you a great example. Right now, we just talked about this yesterday in the nursing world. Only 10% traditionally were men. Guess what? Nurses are so incredibly critical to everything that we do in healthcare. We're now growing it to 16% and more. And being a man in the nursing field, you're a minority. And so, in order to increase diversity, bringing in men into the nursing field is exactly doing that, right? So, you're resonating with half the patient population, you're resonating with a different traditional sense of the word nurse. And I think there's a big article just last week in Wall Street Journal about the growth of men in nursing and how important that is. So, diversity means different things in different contexts. A
Absolutely.
white male is very diverse in a nursing field, right? So, that's what I mean by diversity is bringing different concepts, different backgrounds, different thought processes to the table for your organization.
Yeah, and again, that's something that is so important. It's the context of what you're talking about. And if you're looking at a photo and everyone looks the same, there's some element that's missing, but it's all relative to the context of what's already existing. So it's funny
Exactly.
just to think about that idea, that whole example of increasing men in nursing is actually diversity, you know?
Yeah.
So you also past president of ASPS, past chair of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, chair of the ACGME Residency Review Committee. What advice do you have to pass on to others who want to contribute to our specialty in those examples of a very, very meaningful way?
I think the best thing is a very simple thing is do your absolute best in that role. So if you are a YPS member, be outstanding at it. Lean into it. If you are a committee member in ASRM, be the best committee member you can, and bring to the table different ideas and try to understand the goals. Too many times you see big personalities come into committees and organizations and they forget the goal. What's the
Mhm.
real goal? And there's actually a book that I read in business school that is so formative for me. It's actually called The Goal, and it's a fictional book that weaves in a lot of operational tenets. And if you get a chance, you should read it. It's actually kind of entertaining,
What's
and
it called?
it's called The Goal.
Oh, the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a real and our operations professor, that was our textbook, is The Goal. And I think that so many times, again, bigger personalities often muddy the waters as to what the real goal is in an organization, in a committee, in a you know uh, council. So I think that if you go back to what the goal is and you do your absolute best in that role, naturally things happen and people start to see that you're contributing in a very meaningful way, not for yourself necessarily, but as a way to propel that committee, that organization forward.
Yeah, it's Tom Brady's Hall of Fame speech. He talks about it's not hard to be special. You really just need to be hardworking and persistent. And when you get these opportunities, it's almost like I think of it as you're almost auditioning, you're building your brand, putting your best foot forward. Because if somebody gives me an opportunity, the last thing I want is for them to say, okay, that's the last time I'm giving Saeed an opportunity. As opposed to, he really helped to advance and do these things that we have never even thought about before.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, but that's really nice to hear from you. And so all of that being said, everything that we discussed today, hindsight's 2020. If you went back, is there any part of your life that you'd say, I really regret this. I wish I had done this differently?
No regrets, because all those failures and the differences that you do really make you who you are today, right?
Mm.
So, you know, some would say I've turned down several jobs to go back home. I think that uh,
Which home, LA or Chicago?
LA, yeah. Chicago is my adopted home and DC is my current home, but LA is always, home where my parents are, my brother, my family. I mean, if I could transplant, my current job to Pasadena, that would be ideal. But again, I think that everything happens for a specific reason to be additive to your current position and where you are. To that end, I'm not a regretter at all.
Mm.
The biggest regret I have is, when I play golf, I probably should put the driver away more and use my 3 wood. But then again, I think those are mistakes that you make for a reason, and
Mm.
without epic failures like I've had in my life, you just don't get the successes.
Just like cases, just like
Like
microsurgery.
cases,
If
yeah,
you have to learn from the worst parts about microsurgery to be a good microsurgeon.
yeah, and you have to
Yeah.
embrace your epic complications and take meticulous notes. I mean, I used to take notes in a personal journal about every case. I get a sticker from the chart, put it in there, write it out for the longest time. And even as a chair of surgery, I was taking notes about my each of my cases and what I did, what suture I put, why I put it there. And you go back and you really study your pictures and you correlate that with your notes. And boy, I mean, I made some, epic, huge failures, and but you learn from it. My mantra is, if you were my resident site, I'd say, be original, make some new mistakes. Don't make the same ones that you did yesterday or that I told you. Be original. There's so many
Yeah.
other new mistakes to make. Make some new ones, and so I think that's the key piece is not to second guess the because you are where you are right now, Saeed, from all the different things that you've done, both good and bad. The
Mhm.
bad decisions are just as important as the good decisions to get you to where you are. So I'm not a big regretter in any way,
Mm.
and so
Mm.
I wish I had something for you there.
No, again, I mean, that's another very unique viewpoint that it's nice to hear, and it helps us realize that you have to move forward, and learn and move forward. So I can't imagine your inbox. I can't imagine how often your cell phone beeps in a day. How do you, and clearly you've mentioned your daughters a lot, your family in LA. How do you make time for your family still? What's like kind of your out of work routine or your out of work mindset?
For me, and still a struggle. I'll be honest with you. It's a struggle, especially in my role now. Like you can't turn your phone off.
Mm.
I was given a lecture in Vienna, and there was issues that I had to deal with, and so you can't necessarily turn your phone off. But what you can do is compartmentalize. And
Mm.
I think for me, uh, my wife may differ. It's interesting. You may want to at some point do an adjunct to this
Yes.
deep with the significant others of the people that you've interviewed to get the real scoop. But I would say that compartmentalizing when I go home, I have especially when I was in Chicago and when I was clinically very busy, it's easy to take that adrenaline or the energy from the OR back home. Uh, but I have this mental sort of visualization that I'm taking my white coat off, even if you don't wear a white coat. And when
Mhm.
you walk in the door, you're dad, and you are going to be the best diaper changer and the best storyteller and
Mhm.
the best, Monopoly. We used to play Candyland a lot, where
Mhm.
I don't know how old your youngest is, but it's. I think they're young, right? Saeed, your
Yeah,
youngest is
246. Yeah.
246. So very similar in distribution to mine. And that's my unsolicited advice to you because your career trajectory is like this, and it's
Mhm.
easy to start to believe everything that people tell you at work. Oh my gosh, Dr. Zuri is so great, this and that. But if you get home, and when you get home, your dad and your husband, and you're the diaper changer, and you're the trash taker outer, and the dog poop scooper, and I think that's an incredibly important piece to remember that you may be Dr. Saeed Azuri at work and everyone's handing you things. I mean, it's unnatural, right? You walk in the operating room, you go like this,
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
puts gloves and gowns on you, and you stick your hand out and they put your instrument, and everyone follows your orders. Well, if you take that and get too used to it at home, that's a recipe for disaster. When you get home,
Mhm.
you've got to be the husband and the grocery man and
Mhm.
the you name it person. And I think that's a really important piece of information to um, to remember because I've seen a lot of people in my career, great plastic surgeons who are great plastic surgeons, and then they come home and they're a great plastic surgeon, but they've haven't become a great husband and a great dad and a great spouse and partner, and that ability to really sort of leave work at work and vice versa, leave home at home. It's hard. It's a struggle, and I don't do it perfectly, but that's something that I constantly try to focus on is the ability to be dad or Saeed uh, at home and be Dr. Azuri at work.
Yeah, it goes back to the theme of being the best in the role that you're plank at the time,
That's
whether
right.
it's at work or at home. It broke my heart the other night, unfortunately, when I was with my three daughters and my wife at the dining room table, having dinner, because we try to have dinner most nights of the week if we can. And my phone went off and I answered it. And then after I got back, my daughter goes, Dad, you answer your phone a lot at meals. And then after that point, I was like, okay, this is an opportunity where I have to set an example. Having dinner with my family is something that's very, very important to me. And the fact that she noticed that really resonated and helped me kind of change what I was doing.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important early lesson to have resonate with you, Saeed, because you know what? The flap's still going to go down in an hour, right?
Yeah.
You got great residents and you got great fellows. And the other thing that I would say that I did, looking back at how important this piece of this conversation is I was very fortunate that my kids' school was on the same campus as where I worked. So in
Hmm.
between, so I took advantage of long turnover times. I would just walk over to school, have lunch with my daughters, or hang out. And that was I look back and a tremendous blessing because as busy as we are, when you get home and you've done a bilateral free flap and then another case at your coverage for the vascular, you get home 8, 9 o'clock, and sometimes your 2 year old's asleep or your 3 year old's, about to go to bed. Well, if your school is on your campus, they've seen you at their brightest moment of the day. You're having lunch with them, and I try to do this as often as I could, is just to walk over there, and it was literally a quarter mile away. My case would be closing. I'd walk over there, have lunch with them, and come back, and the case would be ready to go. And I try to do that as much as I could, especially when they're at that
Oh,
two,
that's
four, six
nice.
stage. Yeah.
That's really nice. So two other questions that I've always been interested in. Number one, how much sleep do you get?
Not enough. I think I could function. I think we all, train our bodies to function without sleep. But I think if I get 6 hours of sleep, it's a pretty good night.
Yeah, that's like me.
Yeah.
And then what's your favorite surgical instrument and why?
The perforator dissector. So people use the Jake, or there's,
McCabe.
something McCabe. McCabe is nice, and I used to McCabe a lot. But there's a perforator dissector, and it's like a smaller, thinner Uber McCabe, and it's hard to do perforator surgery without it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so, so much for your time. I mean, not only did I enjoy this, I think the world is going to enjoy this. This was like just an absolute blast talking with you. And I can't imagine what the rest of your schedule looks like for today. So thank you so, so much. I really do appreciate it.
Saeed, thank you for having me, and I really uh, enjoy always have watched your career grow. Even from that room in the oral board exam, I knew that there was
I
something.
know.
So
Well,
I see.
the best thing about the oral board exam is afterwards you go, Saeed, you look nervous. And what I wanted to say is, Dr. Song, that was the oral board exam in class. My career depends on it, and that's a story that I still share with other people.
It's hilarious. No, but I know this podcast was about us talking, but I see great things for you in your future, Saeed, and you're
Oh,
doing
thank you so
phenomenal
much.
things. You really are, and it's not going to be too far down the road where the tables are turning. Maybe I'll interview you as a
No,
podcast
that's not true.
guest. So,
That's not true.
thank you.
Well, thank you so much.